Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate proceed out of order for consideration of a joint tribute for Mr. Patrick Teegarden.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will proceed out of order for a moment of personal privilege. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we have a joint tribute. The House has considered this tribute first. It is now our turn, and I would ask Ms. Cole to please read the language in the tribute.
State of Colorado, the Senate and House of Representatives, convened in the 73rd General Assembly, hereby extends sincere condolences and expressions of sympathy to the Teegarden family on the passing of Pat Teegarden. Patrick "Pat" Teegarden was born on September 1st, 1953, in Little Rock, Arkansas, and was raised in Bethesda, Maryland, as the oldest of 4 children. Pat began a life of public service after earning his undergraduate degree and law degree from the University of Colorado. In addition to practicing law and working in real estate management, Pat served his community in many ways, including working with Congressman Tim Wirth, serving as Vice President of Government Affairs with the Denver Chamber of Commerce, and serving as Deputy Director of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. In 2011, Pat joined the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment as its Director of Policy and Legislation. During his time working for the Department of Labor and Employment at the Colorado General Assembly, Pat was known as one of the kindest, most honorable people working for the government of the state of Colorado. Pat passionately studied the Civil War and the history of Abraham Lincoln, and his heroes were President Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr., John Lewis, and all who stood up for civil rights, justice, and equality. He was an avid Rockies fan as a season ticket holder. As a skier, he was once described as an elegant, unmade bed in blue jeans on the slopes. On February 4th, 2022, Pat passed away far too soon. For 32 years, Pat was a loving husband to his wife, Christine Letting, and a loving father to his children, Leanne and Jade. The state of Colorado was blessed by the service of Pat, and he leaves a legacy that will make lives better for decades to come. The Colorado General Assembly honors the life and legacy of Pat Teegarden and his contributions to the state of Colorado and its citizens. On request of Representatives Matt Gray, Alec Garnett, Danae Esgar, and Hugh McKean, and Senators Stephen Fenberg, Dominic Moreno, Chris Holbert, and Faith Winter, given this 9th day of March, 2022, State Capitol, December, Colorado, signed by Stephen Fenberg, President of the Senate, and Alec Garnett, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Minority Leader Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. President. A moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had a spontaneous memorial comments when we heard the news. Now we gather together as a Senate, a chamber, to do this in a more formal way. Most of the memorials, the people we remember and speak about here in the well are members, former members of this chamber. This is a well-deserved exception to that. Pat Teegarden was every bit my equal in this building. Pat Teegarden was a friend. And for family, I think of a quote from Lincoln, because I am a Lincoln fan as well, that he spoke at Gettysburg, and I've used this when we remember fallen officers, military, but in this case, I think it needs to be referenced. At Gettysburg, Lincoln noted that the words that we elected officials might speak cannot add or detract from the sacrifices that the people in the military, the men and women who fought and died for this nation, our words can't make those sacrifices better or worse. They're just words. I'm going to try. Pat Teegarden, as the reader offered to all of us, he was something different. He was something special. And family, you know these things, but I want to assure you that everyone here, members, staff, the public, anyone who came in contact with Pat, knows this as well. He had an incredible ability to convey caring, compassion, wanting to help. And for the hundreds, the thousands of people during COVID who experienced challenges in unemployment claims, how monotonously boring are those, except for the people who are affected by that. And Pat poured himself into solving those problems hundreds, thousands of times. I would forward emails from constituents or non-constituents to Pat and say, here's another one. Not restating everything that constituent, that person in Colorado had explained about his or her situation, but here's another one, because that's all Pat needed. And late at night and early in the morning on weekends and holidays, I would get an email back, I'm on it, we're on it. We'll take care of this. And for the folks outside the Capitol who didn't know Pat, who might see the world and consider government in a way similar to that I do, it's easy for us to assume that the people who work for government aren't passionate, aren't looking to solve problems quickly. The government moves slowly. Not true. Not true when it comes to Pat Teegarden. That man cared so much about everyone. Not some, but everyone. When I was chair of Senate Business Committee, Business, Labor, Technology, my good friend from Denver who holds that position now, and on finance, Senate Finance, those committees deal a lot with the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. Revenue's another one, but CDLE is one where there's a lot of conversation. A lot of the bills that come through the Business Committee and the Finance Committee have to do with CDLE. And Pat and I had to know each other better. We had to be able to speak frankly. He needed to come to me and say, this is good, this is bad, this will work, this won't work. And that doesn't necessarily mean how I might vote yes or no on a bill, but functionally, how does this affect that department down the street? And Pat had an incredible ability to work with people on both sides of the aisle, to represent the Hickenlooper administration for all 8 years that I was here for Governor Hickenlooper's administration and the transition to Governor Polis. Words cannot add or detract to who Pat was and the incredible, generous pouring out of his life. Thank you for giving so much of Pat to the people of Colorado and those of us who are blessed to work here. I can't make him better, but he sure made me better. Thanks, Pat. Godspeed. We love you.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you. Pat became one of my very favorite people, not just to work with, but to be friends with, and he was a shining star in a place that is often dark. And today we are all wearing these stickers that say, "Be like Pat." And when I went out into the lobby to hand out stickers, whether you're a lobbyist or an intern or a partisan staffer or a nonpartisan staffer or elected, everyone swarmed me because they wanted to wear a sticker because they understand what it means to be like Pat and how unique and rare he was in the work we do. And so for me, what it means to be like Pat, and we should all come here every day and try to infuse his spirit and his energy and be more like Pat, is first to smile more. There's not enough smiles here. To offer grace always to everyone. To find humor and also share that humor. Because we can do more work together when we find humor together. Do it for the impact and not the glory. There's thousands of Coloradans all over the state that got their unemployment insurance because of what Pat did. They're not worried about their wages being stolen because of what Pat did. They have paid sick leave because of what Pat did. And no one knows his name, but they feel more safe and secure because of the work he did. He did the work for impact and not the glory. Always offer kindness in every moment. Things get tense here, and Pat always had kindness. So let's do that more. Wake up and see the opportunity in every day. Working for the government and doing legislation can be a grind. Every single day he saw opportunity in what we could accomplish together. Wear bright colors and listen to music that makes you happy. Pat's shirts were legendary. His love of the Grateful Dead was legendary. Find what makes you happy and do more of it. And finally, he showed up every day and saw the good in everyone, regardless of your job, your position, your party. So let's show up to this building and be like Pat every single day.
Senator Donovan.
Mr. President, I request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. When we are out in public, maybe at an Avs game, perhaps a Rockies game, perhaps even just at the grocery store or at a local parade, you don't often want to hear the "Senator" shouted, right? You're like, oh, shoot. Like, what am I going to have to hear about now, right? You're just like, I just wanted to take a couple hours off and check out. My husband and I were at a Rockies game, and we had settled down, had great seats, and we're just about to take that first sip of a cold beer, basking in that warm light that only the Rockies Stadium can deliver. And from behind, I hear, "Senator!" And I was like, okay, who in Denver at a Rockies game has recognized me? I'm not even in my fancy Denver clothes, you know? And I turn around, and sure enough, it's Pat. And he's come down, bounding down from a couple rows above, and he grabs Shad and I, and he goes, "You guys look great today. I need to take a picture." And we're like, no, Pat, it's fine. We don't need, no, you guys look great. I need to take a picture. He grabs one of our phones, gets down on one knee, and takes a picture of us up angle. And my husband, being the millennial he is, goes, "That's a horrible angle, Pat. No, he's like, "No, you guys look great. You guys look great." Takes the picture, turns away, and he kind of half hops, half jogs back to his seat. That wide grin, those bright eyes, and I think hair that always had a plan of his own. And he goes and sits down, and I turned to my husband, and we just kind of said, "What a good guy. What a good guy," as he left that day. It's a simple story, right? It was just a moment in time. But it was just Pat every day, right? "You guys look great. Let me take a picture." Bounded away before we could even really tell him thanks. And now we have that picture in our photos. And he was right. The angle was better and we did look great. But on that day as he left, we just simply said, what a good guy. And I say that today, now that he's left. What a good guy.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Folks, I'm sorry that I'm not in the chamber with you today. I just wanted to say a few words about Pat. And so thank you for allowing me that grace. To the family, I know it's gotta be really tough to come here today, but we celebrate Pat and his importance inside the building. And as the other speakers have mentioned to you today, how privileged and honored we all are to have been able to work with him. But I think, as they've also described, the unique thing about Pat was he was genuinely looking for the good in the situation or the work we were doing or the people he was working with. When things got tough, he did have a calm and measured approach, but he was always looking for the good in each other and also trying to find the positive way through whatever negotiation we might have been working on. It's not common, unfortunately. And he was always honest, 100% of the time, and just fun to be around and fun to work with. And so it is kind of you to come here today and allow us to speak about our friend, because the hole that he leaves in my life is tangible. I cannot imagine how difficult it must be for his family and his close friends outside the building. You have my sincere condolences and empathy as much as I can offer it. He spoke about you often, by the way, and always really complimentary. I feel like I kind of knew his girls, even though we've never met. And it was just nice to have someone who was always genuinely interested in my family, my kids, what was going on in my world. He had a genuine interest in us, which made everything very pleasant. Again, not as common as it should be inside of this Capitol. I consider Pat a very dear friend. So thank you for sharing him with us. And I understand, although I can't see you all, that a number of his colleagues are in the gallery today. I think you were also impacted in a really significant way with Pat's passing. And I want to extend my condolences to you as well. He was fantastic to work with in my capacity. I can only imagine how great it would have been to have been on a team with him day in and day out all day long. And what I do know what he meant to a number of you because we've spoken about this many times. So again, I am so very sorry for your loss. I think you all know that I do a lot of work that had to do with and impacted the Department of Labor and Employment. My focus is on workers' rights, whether it was, one of my first attempts at wage theft, combating wage theft. Pat and I found 100-year-old law on the books, and it was his dedication, my first year in the state house, actually, that we figured out a way to pick away at one of the significant issues that allowed people to be victims of wage theft. And it was my first introduction to working closely with him. But from then on, we worked very closely together. And whether it was wage theft or caregivers, right? Medical caregivers, janitors, equal pay, farm workers, any kind of workers' rights legislation that I was trying to accomplish, I needed to work with the Department of Labor, and Pat was there. And so whether or not you agreed with me on the policy, there was a person in the department who was dedicated to, as my colleague from Westminster mentioned, protecting people out in the public, what was right and what was wrong. And he shared my values in trying to help workers in every way that he could, in every way the department should. And he was a real advocate when it was appropriate, and I will be forever grateful for that. And I think that the workers across the state will too, although we still had a lot of work to do. It was a pleasure and a privilege to work with him, and my colleagues are right. This state would be a lot different if it weren't for the dedicated public service of this extraordinary man. And I could probably go on for a very long time, but I won't. I just, I can't express enough how honored and privileged I feel, how lucky I am to have partnered so closely with such a good person, such a dedicated public servant. And I will always be a better senator for it, but I was definitely instantly a better person and a better friend for knowing Pat. And again, to the family, I hope that I can meet you sometime soon in person. And if there is anything that I or my family can do to help you through this difficult time, I hope you will reach out and let us know. So you take care and keep in touch. Thank you.
Senator Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Sorry I could not be there today. We're dealing with issues of our own. But Patrick Teegarden, Pat, was the most incredible state employee I ever encountered. His dedication to the job, to helping the people, is unmatched. He stands at the top of this podium in the gold medal round, I assure you. I had a call just a couple of days ago that they had contacted me, and I had just sent it off to Pat just prior to his illness, and said that he would be working on it. And they called back and said, Mr. Teegarden had called us, but we haven't heard anything. Do you know the status of our claim? And I said, I do not. And they said, well, it's been 30 weeks that we've been waiting for our check. And Pat was the kind of guy that more than once, multiple times, people would call me early in the morning and say, you know what? Mr. Teegarden called me last night at 8 o'clock. And he said he can get me help. And that was just time and time and time again. He is the ultimate state employee. Matter of fact, I told him back in December on an issue, I said, you know, this is my last year here, and I'm going to do a tribute to you as the most dedicated employee in the state of Colorado. And for his colleagues that are sitting in the room, he set the bar high. Reach for that level. Go for that extra mile and do it for Pat, because that's what he would expect of you. A great man, honored to know him, but the best thing that I could call him was friend. Miss you greatly. Thank you.
Senator Janal.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ask for a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you. My heart goes out to Pat Teegarden's family, who's here with us today, and to all of us, actually, because we are missing a dear friend and a family member. I would be remiss if I did not say similar things about the last 2 years and all the help that Pat had given me and my constituents for the unemployment issues that came up in my district. But one of the other areas that I wanted to mention was the help that I received on several bills having to do with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Pat had helped in regards to 2 bills that I ran, one in 16 and one in 18, which was the Employment First recommendations. What it did was it supported employment services for persons with disabilities, provider training requirement, reimbursement of vendors, and actually ACT required that the Department of Labor and Employment and the State Medical Services Board make rules to allow people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who can do the same job that anyone else can that doesn't have an intellectual or developmental disability get paid the same wages. That to me was a big part of that. Being a success was due to Pat Teegarden. And I want to thank him for that, and I know many other people, not only inside this chamber, outside of the Capitol, thank him so much for helping the people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Thank you.
President Finberg.
Thank you, Madam President. I request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Madam President. The weekend after Pat passed away, I think we all just had a gut reaction, and we all told stories about our dear friend Pat, and we spoke about it at the well. And I'm grateful that we're taking the time to honor him a little more formally this morning. And thank you to his family for being here today. I don't have to tell any of you this, but he loved his family, and he talked about you all the time. And in fact, he just loved family. We heard about you and how much you meant to him, but Pat also liked to ask about our families. And that meant so much to us in a world where it seems like all too often this work is transactional and we're just kind of trying to get through the work. He always would prefer to talk about family and what was happening in our lives. And I think that actually made so much of the work that we all did together that much more productive and that much more rewarding in a lot of ways. I think he also loved this institution and those who are here, and we considered, I think I can speak for all of us, in one way or another, we all considered Pat part of this family. And we're a weird family, sometimes dysfunctional, but we are a family, whether we like it or not. We probably spend more time with each other than maybe our families during session. And we very much felt like Pat was a part of it. And so many legislatures before us felt that way as well. Pat was as pure of a human that probably ever worked in this building. He was a true public servant in every sense of that concept. And when I think of Pat, I said this weeks ago when we first learned of his passing, the word that immediately comes to mind, I think, for so many of us is that he's a helper. Some people are helpers and some not so much. Pat was the epitome of being a helper in this society. And in this world, in politics, it can obviously be, like I said, transactional, self-serving, sometimes about power, your own personal agendas and advancements. And it absolutely never was for Pat. And all of us who come here with the best of intentions, it's hard to sort of keep all of that front of mind sometimes. You get wrapped up in things. It never felt like Pat did. He always knew that he was here to help. And whenever constituents reached out to us about labor issues, about employment issues, about their benefits, etc., we all called Pat. He made us look good to our constituents because we could often sort of help solve their problem, but in the end, it was actually Pat that was solving that problem for so many people. People that never knew his name. I genuinely believe the work that Pat did saved lives and saved families and kept families together. Because when you came to us, or when you came to find yourself being helped by Pat, it probably meant that society or government or another institution failed you in one way or another. And that's what Pat did, was he made sure that there was a safety net there for you and your family. And he helped so many people because of that role. I said weeks ago, if there is a heaven, it just got a whole lot more fun when Pat joined it. And I hope every single day includes a baseball game by day and a Grateful Dead concert by night. And I hope he's continuing since that day when I first said that to enjoy those baseball games and those Grateful Dead concerts. This world is so much better because of Pat Teegarden. And there's an enormous void with you gone, Pat. And as others have said, the only way we can start to attempt to fill that void is if we all are a little bit more like Pat. And we need to learn to love our families unconditionally, just like Pat did every single day, to care about the well-being of the families of others, even if we've never met them, and most of all, to help others and not ask for a thing in return. Thank you for always being you, Pat. We're all better off for knowing you. The state and this world is better because of you. And to his family, may his memory always be a blessing. Thank you.
Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Madam President. I request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you. Members, there's not much more that can be said about Pat that hasn't already been said. And I was, like you, blessed to know him both professionally and personally, and his family. When I first met Pat, one of the things that I told him after my election to the House was that, we finally got past this election, and I was now even more nervous about the undertaking of being a state elected official and figuring out how I was going to uphold the promises that I made to my constituents, one of them which was Pat, in order to get the work done. And one of the things he taught me, he said, Senator, and I said, please call me James. And he said, well, Senator, he said, take the work seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. And then he leaned in and told me, he said, how many days are there in the legislative session? I said, about 120, depending on the year. And he said, I said, so that's a lot of days. I'm kind of nervous about this. And he said, I'm more afraid for the calendar because its days are numbered. Yes, dad jokes. And I proceeded to ask him, how do you find Will Smith in the snow? And I told him, I said, you got to look for Fresh Prince. See that? So we played this game. To his daughters, I'm sure you probably appreciate dad jokes. But another thing he taught me was, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And that there's a lot of people who get into these positions, they get out of these positions, they start off one way, they turn into somebody different, they forget where they come from and who they are, but just hold on to who you are. So if Pat was here, he would ask me to put my preacher voice on and ask you to look to the neighbor on your right, if you have a neighbor, and say, neighbor, it's more important to be nice. Nobody followed me. Okay, if you have a neighbor on your left, look at your neighbor on your left and say, neighbor, it's more important to be nice. This is a belief that permeates through his family and what they believe. And that being said, I wanted to ask the members of his family to stand as I say their name. We'd like Chris Letting to please stand. We'd like Leanne Teegarden to stand. Jade Teegarden to stand. Ann Doherty, please stand. Mike Doherty, please stand. Dennis Wegener, please stand. Am I missing anybody? I believe we have everyone. Members, can we please take a moment and recognize the family of Pat Teegarden with a round of applause. It's not just Pat who did the work, but a strong family that stood by his side, as we all have a support system in order to do the work that we do. And that being said, he was not just my constituent, he was everyone's constituent, everyone's friend. And he proudly wore our flag on his shoulders. And that is why we present this flag of the state of Colorado that was flown at the Colorado State Capitol in honor of Patrick Teegarden for a life of service and achievement that is truly worthy of recognition and remembrance at the request of the Colorado General Assembly, February 4th, 2022. God bless you all. We love you.
Again, thank you all for joining us in honoring Pat, and may his work and who Pat is always live on throughout this institution. The Senate will stand in a brief recess to greet our guests.